Hello everyone. By now you should be ready to start loading up data and building data frames. And that's going to be pretty important for us as we work through the rest of this class. Because for a lot of the predictive analytics tools that we're going to use, we will build data frames first as we load in data. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you this first video, and I've asked you to watch this one first because it's pretty straightforward, but I really want to emphasize the ability to sort of check your working directory and change directory and the importance of that. When I first started learning how to program, one of the most frustrating things was to try to find the files that I was going to load into. I was using R at the time, and to try to make sure that I had the right directory set and that I could specify everything I needed to specify. So I'm going to go through this in a little bit of detail, and then I'm going to turn you loose on a video made by a young student named Keith, a young instructor named Keith. He does a really good job of going through a Pokemon data set, and I want you to take a look at that and follow along with him because he shows you all kinds of cool stuff to do once you've built a data frame. Then from there, I'm going to give you an assignment. I'm going to give you a data set where I want you to load that data set and answer some questions about it. You're going to load it up. You're going to build the data frame by loading it, actually. And you're going to be able to answer some questions. And these are all things that you should have found in the data camp assignments. Most of this should look familiar to you. So let's start. I have created for you a list of all of the presidents, starting with Washington and going all the way down to Trump. And what I have also included is I've included their year of birth, their year of death. I've included the starting time of their presidency and the end time of their presidency. So it's just a little data file, and you're going to be able to load that up and take a look at it. Okay. When we are working with data frames, the most useful library by far, and if you didn't figure this out from the the training data camp courses, I'll tell you right now, is Pandas. And Pandas was built for data frame and data analysis. That's what it does. So one of the first things we need to do whenever we're going to work with the data frames, we want to import Pandas. And you'll very often see, most often see actually, Pandas imported as PD, just because it's become a standard abbreviation for it. So the first thing in our script we're going to do is we're going to import Pandas as PD. Now a word about Pandas. If you're using Anaconda, any version of Anaconda, or any tool in Anaconda, I should say, in this particular case, I'm using a Jupyter Notebook, Pandas comes along with the Anaconda package. So you don't have to download it, you have to install it. That's not going to be the case with every single library that you use. In some cases, you might actually have to go out and install the library. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But Pandas is not one of them. It comes along with Anaconda. So you can go ahead and import Pandas as PD. And the second package we're going to use is a package called OS. And it's really kind of operating system things you can do, and that, just leave it at that. Import OS. We need it. So go ahead and import it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out what's going on with our directory, current working directory. Now, when you installed Python, installed Anaconda, you installed it into a particular directory. And it also identified a directory that it was going to use as the directory where it's going to look for everything. And it's going to look for all of its files in that single directory unless it's otherwise you tell it to do something else. So what we're going to do here, the OS is your library, and in that library is the get cwd command that will allow you to find out what your current working directory is. And what that current working directory is it is where Python is looking for everything. And make no mistake, if what you want to load is not in that current working directory, and you've made no other arrangements or taken no other effort to try to identify where that file is, you will not be able to load your file. So let's go ahead and run this first section. We'll import our libraries and we'll get our current working directory. And down here is our current working directory. And in my particular case, it is users. I've got a directory here under users that is me. I'm loading everything up on OneDrive, which is the Microsoft cloud. And then there's a documents there, or a documents directory there, that is where I basically am loading everything up. As long as my file I want to load is in that folder, users, Kurt D, OneDrive documents, you're golden. Okay. But if you've downloaded it, quite often it will be in a downloaded directory. So it will not find it. And so you're going to have to go and change this directory, or you're going to have to specify the entire length of the path when you load the file. Okay. So that's where we're getting into this next section. Where is our file? Okay. Well, that can be challenging because if I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, we could specify a new directory. We could, or we could come down here when we load our file and we could specify the entire directory name that precedes the actual name of the file. But if you don't know what the directory is, or you're not familiar with it, or you're not really comfortable with Windows directory structures, kind of behind the scenes, then one of the things you can do is you can use another tool that I've found for you called Easy GUI. So the question we're going to ask is, where is our file? Okay, and Easy GUI is a package or a library that will help you find where your file is. Okay, but you might have to install the Easy GUI library first. All right, and this is getting back to that idea. Remember I told you that Pandas and OS, those are already loaded in Anaconda. You don't need to worry about them. Okay, they come along with the package. Easy GUI does not. Okay, Easy GUI is a package that is out there. You can go get it. You can install it. But here's the command to install it. This PIP is how you install libraries. PIP, you use the argument install on PIP, and then you specify the name of the library you want to install. When you run PIP install Easy GUI, ideally, if it's able to find that, it will load that library into your Python environment, and now you have access to being able to import it and then use it. So I've already done that, so I'm not going to actually do it again. I'll go ahead and comment that out. But assuming that you needed to download it, there you are with a PIP install Easy GUI. Now we can use it to find the file. So import Easy GUI, you need to do that, of course, in order to make it work. And then you use a print command. Print command Easy GUI with an extension of file open box. And let me show you what it does. Now this is a little confusing. We'll go ahead and run it. It doesn't look like it did anything, but that's because it's behind the scenes. So you go ahead and minimize your notebook, and it has brought up a screen. It is like a Windows screen. It looks a little different, it's a little fuzzier, not quite the same as Windows screens are, but what it's doing is it's showing you all of the documents in the current directory. Well, this is the one I want. If it wasn't the one I want, I could move around to whatever folder I wanted to move to, and then I could specify, well, there's my file, presidents.csv. I'll click on that and click on open. I go back now to my notebook. It has given me the actual location of my file. Okay, so it is in users, Kurt D, OneDrive, documents, presidents.csv. Okay. Well, that turns out to be the directory that I'm actually set to. But let's assume that it wasn't. Assume that this was downloads. So now I would have to take action in order to make Python be able to find my file. A couple ways we can do this. Okay, one thing we can do, we go back to use another function or another tool out of OS. In this case, it's OS period change directory. Okay. My current working directory was OneDrive documents. Assume that my file is in OneDrive downloads and I want to change that. Well, I've already got this listed out here. So what I can do is I can capture where my file was with everything except for the file name and copy it with a Control-C. And then I can do an OSCHDIR. Actually, let's fix this. Let's only get don't worry about the last slash. Only the documents. And then I can do an OSCHDIR and in parentheses and also in single quotes, drop that directory location in there. And once you have that in there, go ahead and run that. And you've just now updated the location of your working directory. So if it was documents and you put it in here to be downloads, it's now downloads. Now that means that it will only ever look in downloads. It's not going to look in documents anymore. It's only ever going to look in downloads in order to be able to find your file. All right, we're ready. We've got the right directory set and we're ready to load the file. Okay. So one more note about this is we could also load the file. We don't have to change our directory. We could put all of this leader up here, or we could just use this. Boom, we can grab that right there like this, the whole thing. Control-C, and we can come down here to our read CSV and drop the whole name in there between the two tick marks. So that's another way to be able to do it. But what we've done is we've changed directories. A couple different ways I've given you to be able to find your file. And we're going to load up a data frame, and we're going to call it presidents. We can call it whatever we want. It could be DF, it could be presidents, it could be junk. You could call it whatever you want. Okay. And we're going to make it equal to, and we have to use PD because read CSV is part of the Pandas package. So we have to specify PD. So PD, and then it's going to do a read CSV function, and it's going to load up that file. It's going to look for that file, and it's going to load it up into a data frame called presidents. So we can go ahead and run that. Now, did it load? Did it not load? Well, it doesn't really tell us, but we can actually find out. So we've got a couple of functions. You should have seen these functions in your data frame classes or your data camp classes. But the first one is, let's take a look at the head of the file. So we use presidents with a method.head attached to it. So presidents.head, because we loaded it into presidents, we click on that. And it gives us the first 5 rows. Remember, Python is a zero indexing language. Every count starts at 0. So we have 0 through 4, but it's actually 5. So we see that we have Washington. His year of birth was 1732. He died in 1799. We got a little bit of an issue here with type. We'll worry about that later. He was president from 1789 until 1797. Okay, it's going to be interesting to see when we look at these fields what the type is for year of death and the end of the presidency. The other thing we could do is we could look at the last 5 rows. Let's go ahead and run that. And we see a couple of interesting things here. These are the most recent, 5 most recent presidents, their year of birth, their year of death. Well, the only one that's died so far is the senior Bush, so that's the only one for which we have data. But note that we have NANs, not a number, which basically means it's blank. Those can be a very big problem in data processing, and there's steps. Python makes it much, much easier than R, but there's steps to get around this with not a numbers. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't, but when it matters, there's a way to get around it. All right, so president from beginning of the presidency to the end of the presidency. And because Trump is still president, we have not a number on the end of his presidency. We can come down here and we could say, okay, let's take a look at the shape of the data frame. So now we're using an attribute. Methods have double parens, attributes don't. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at shape of the data frame. And all it's going to tell us is how many rows and how many columns. Well, we have 45 presidents, so 45 rows makes sense. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. That makes sense. It's a small data frame. But if it was a gigantic data frame, for example, it had 100,000 records and 250 different columns, that would be good information to know. And now we're going to take a look at some other information. We're going to do the info. We're going to do the info method, and I want it to tell me information about the president's data frame. Click on that. Look at this. This gives us all kinds of good information. It looks initially kind of like a mess, but all of it is good information. So we have, it is a Pandas data frame. That's the first thing it tells us. The class of it is a Pandas core frame data frame. Okay, the range index is 45. There are 45 entries. Okay, we start counting at 0 and we go to 44. We have data columns. We have a total of 5 data columns. The president is a string. It's the name of the president and is treated as an object. The object basically is a string in a data frame. Year of birth, there are 45 entries. There are 45 entries for president as well. It is the 45 are non-null, and this one is treated as an integer. Okay, so the integer, hence that we see that the single year, like 1976 or 46, I'm sorry, 1961, 19, all the way through. If we come up here and we look at the beginning of the presidency, those are all treated as integers. Okay, but for some strange reason, the year of death was converted to a float, which is basically a non-integer number, and it dropped a .0 there. And so that's a really easy thing to fix. We could just reclassify both of those float columns as integers, and we can fix that in a real quick second. I'm not going to worry about it right now, but just know that it's really easy to set that up and just change the format of that over. We see the president from, and then we see the president and the until. So let's take a look at year of birth. All 45 presidents have a year of birth. So we see that there are 45 entries, and that number matches the number of entries we actually have in the data frame. But only 40 out of 45 have a year of death, which means we have 1 existing sitting president and 4 past presidents who do not have an entry there. That means that those 5 presidents are going to have NANs, or not a number, or basically missing data in that field. So that's how you can tell if you've got complete data in your column or if you're missing data in your column. And if you're missing data in your column, you may need to take action to address that in certain tools. All of them have a president from date, a date when they first became, or year when they first became president. And so we have 45 good entries there, and you'll see on the far right that that is also an integer. So that one doesn't have the .0 after it, but the until field does have the .0 after it, because for whatever reason when we loaded it, it converted it to be a floating number. A floating number is a decimal number. So that one has, it will need to be converted over. I mean, if we really needed to. It's dot zero, we just ignore the dot zero. But if we want clean data, we might want to go ahead and convert that over to an integer. You'll also see that until is populated in 44 out of 45 records because our current president is still president. So we don't have a end of his presidency date. Okay. Down at below, the bottom, it gives you a summary. We have two columns that are floating decimals. We have two columns that are integers, and we have one column that is an object or a string, and it's using 1.8 kilobytes of memory. So this presidents.info can turn out to be, or the .info method on any data frame can turn out to be a really useful source of information because it tells you all kinds of things about your data frame, things that could wind up being important. It tells you the number of rows, number of columns, tells you the number of how many fields have good, well, how many of each field have good data in them is what I'm trying to say. And then it gives you kind of the summary at the bottom. Okay, so just to recap, we need Pandas. We need OS only if we're going to get the current working directory or change the working directory. Okay. We can use the easy GUI, install it first, import it, and then use that to identify the path name of the file you're looking for. You can either convert your working directory to the first part of this location, or you can just take the entire location and paste it into your pd read underscore csv in between the tick marks and leave it at that. And then when you import it, it'll import it right from its source. We can use the head and the tail to see the first part of the data and the last part of the data. In a data set like presidents, it's most likely that we'd be missing data at the tail. We used the shape attribute to give us the number of rows and columns. And lastly, we used the info method on the president's data frame to get information about a number of different things having to do with that data frame. So that's a quick review of how to load data in. What we're going to do next is I'm going to have you work with the video. It's an hour-long video where he goes through the Pokemon data set, and I just think it's useful. I think it's useful practice. Now, in reality, the first 20 minutes are probably about the best. So if you get into about 20 minutes of it and you're like, okay, I feel like I've got this, you can go ahead and drop out, and that'd be a good useful thing. And I put it there just for your own use. It's not graded. It's not anything that you have to do. I just think it's useful. Then there's another video in there that I've thrown in that's on Pandas and loading data. Again, useful, but just for your reference. Your assignment will be to load a data set that I give you. It's going to be a .csv. You're going to load that file into Python, and you're going to do a number of things on it. And so I'll provide more information in the actual assignment itself.